the shootings at Kent State University, the Goodyear War, flaws in the military healthcare system, a tornado that tore through a small town in southwestern Ohio, the Mapplethorpe controversy, atrocities committed by Tiger Force during the Vietnam War. For 100 years now, these and hundreds of other stories have been recognized and honored by way of the Pulitzer Prize. This prize was established in Joseph Pulitzer's will in the early 1900s. Included in the illustrious list of Pulitzer Prize winners are several journalists working for Ohio news outlets. Since the first Pulitzer Prize was awarded to an Ohio media outlet in 1927, Ohio journalists have been recognized for their public service reporting, local reporting, general news reporting, local general or spot news reporting, spot news photography, feature photography, national reporting, editorial cartooning, editorial writing, commentary, and investigative reporting.
It's one of those projects that's just, a dream. You're the Toledo Blade, and you're getting these unredacted war crimes cases out of Vietnam, 30 years earlier. And these were cases where you could have easily said, hey, it's some history story. Then you find out there's a cover-up, and you find out that the length of atrocities went on for 7.5 months. No case came close to that in the Vietnam War. And then it leads to a war crimes investigation for 4.5 years. We embarked on a project that few thought that we should be doing. We're a mid-sized paper from Middle America, and we're looking at war crimes. As time went on, and as the series unfolded for 4 days, by the end of the 4th day, and by the time we got into the soldiers and their post-traumatic stress, and how they lived with the events for the last 30 years, that is when it started resonating with the public, and they realized this is a story that needed to be written. This is a story that was critically important, that if you can bury events like this, you can bury anything in war.
2003, just 2 years after 9/11. So we had troops that had gone into Afghanistan, troops going into Iraq. These were wildly popular wars at the time, after we'd suffered the biggest terrorist attack in our history. So to have the Toledo Blade come in and bring up war crimes from a past war, we didn't know what we were going to get.
We were in the middle of a war in Iraq, and all of a sudden we're publishing Buried Secrets, Brutal Truths, these horrific events. We're talking about soldiers wearing necklaces of human ears. We're talking about, men going up to bunkers and throwing in grenades, where women and children were hiding, creating these mass underground graves. This is horrific stuff. And we're coming out and unveiling this during a time when there's, patriotism is running very high. So there was a lot of thought that went into this, and how we do it, and where we do, when we do it. But we knew this: if we had not run it, and we had found a way to kind of squirrel it away in the corner, we would have been guilty of the same cover-up. We were able to interview soldiers and victims, and to go over to Vietnam and spend 16 days in the Central Highlands tracking these trails of atrocities. And I think the most interesting part of this, and what made it a significant story, is there was a cover-up. The fact that the Pentagon would cover it up.
So we had to be careful. Number one, we didn't want to lie to them. We didn't want to mislead who we are. We didn't want to mislead our research. But at the same time, we didn't want to feed them stuff either. We didn't want to tell them what the records said right away, on fear that would somehow inform their memory of it. We wanted to have their memory unvarnished of what happened, and then try to triangulate with the records, what they're remembering, what the records said. I'd like to hope our reports helped educate people on the complexities of war. When you send soldiers in harm's way, bad things can happen, unintended consequences. I guess collateral damage is the term that's used. And I think in Tiger Force, what we were able to show was the collateral damage was not only the innocent civilians that were killed and hurt in other ways, but it was the soldiers. There's a lot of great reporters who've done a lot of great work who haven't won one. And at times, winning and losing a Pulitzer can just be a judgment of judges. It's an imperfect science. So I wanted to be careful not to think that somehow I was a different person, a different reporter than I was when I walked in the door that day. Because I think, if you fall into that trap of thinking you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, it can really hurt you career-wise. It can really hurt you as a reporter.
Before they started uncorking the champagne, Mitch says, let's remember for a second the soldiers, the post-traumatic stress, how they've suffered through these years. Please let's not forget the victims and their families and their loved ones in this, because real things happened here. This was not a joyous occasion for them. So let's remember them for a moment. And we did, and I'm glad we did that. It was a great touch, led to a great celebration. And I gotta say the real work starts, because it's not enough just to rest on your laurels. If anything, your bar is higher. And it's the love of the work is why we're doing this. It's not about the prizes. It's great to win them. They're a great byproduct. I can tell you, the Pulitzer's not on my wall anywhere. My kids' pictures are on my wall, not the Pulitzer. It's something you put away and you treasure in your heart, but damn, it makes you work harder, and it should make you work harder. It should set the bar higher.
I grew up in Xenia, but I was in the 1974 tornado, and I am a survivor of the 1974 tornado, just like Xenia is. There was some really dark clouds rolling in, and we went to the north window of the house to look out for the weather, and there were black clouds and a kind of a weird green tinge. Then the lightning started, and it would stay down on the ground a long time, so we thought that was very strange. And went around to the front of the house, which faced southwest, because that's where our weather usually comes from in this area. And we saw a big gray roiling cloud, and it was headed for the house. And I had my little weather book, and I asked my mom, is that a tornado? And she told me to go clean out the coat closet. So here I'm throwing scarves and mittens and things out there, and she looked up and saw a great big reel-to-reel tape recorder. And she thought, that's going to fall on our heads. That's what she's told us later. And she said, go get in the bathtub, because the bathroom was the only interior room with no windows. So my sister and my mom and I piled into the bathroom. Mom took my glasses and hers, so they didn't break and poke us in the eyes. We heard all the windows slam shut with the pressure, and the glass was hitting the walls. We could hear it swirling around and hitting the walls. And then it was over. It seemed like it lasted a long time, but it didn't last very long. So we looked up and we could see the blue sky through the bathroom ceiling. Our kitchen clock stopped at 4:38. It hit downtown at 4:40. 2 minutes to get 2 miles. So it was going very fast. Little old Xenia got a Pulitzer Prize. That's all I remember really about it. I think it's wonderful now. Of course, I've grown up and I can really get into that. But at the time, it was, but we've got our house to rebuild. Where's my dolls? You don't think about it that much when you're a kid. I think it's kind of a one lone bright spot in the darkness that became after the tornado.
And what a bright spot it was. This award was given not to an individual or small team of reporters, but to all 80 members of the organization. According to the paper, the Xenia Daily Gazette's editor chose to nominate the entire organization because reporting the aftermath of the tornado was a group effort. The mechanical crew couldn't print the papers as the tornado had ripped off the roof of the Gazette's building and utilities were no longer functioning, but they worked to clean up the mess, which allowed the rest of the newsroom to keep the news flowing. Despite many challenges faced by the staff, the Xenia Daily Gazette continued its century-plus record of getting the newspaper out every day.
The Enquirer, in its wonderful wisdom, eventually told me, I know our way of looking at the political world is different. It was a very Republican conservative newspaper, and I was not becoming a Republican conservative editorial cartoonist. But they said in order for you to feel good about your work and to say things strongly and with conviction, you're going to have to say what you believe in, and your signature is going to be on these cartoons, and our readers will understand the distinction between our editorial philosophy written in the editorials and what I was saying in the cartoon right next to them. And so go at it. And that's what I did for the next 30 years. I just kept my head down and drew what I believed in. When Simon Lease came down on the Mapplethorpe art exhibit, it just felt to me like we were choking, like it was just too much. He had no business in there, telling us what we should see or think about what we saw. And it was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. I had done cartoons on Simon Lease before and his henchmen, Art Ney and Larry Whalen, but this was sort of like a showdown. It felt to me like high noon. If I had an influence, it was then. It was then. And I felt like I felt like I was leading the charge. I felt like I was giving voice to one side of the argument. And I was proud, frankly. I was proud of my work during that time. Maybe proudest of that of anything I did. Bill Keating, my publisher, stood up behind his desk when I arrived there, and he reached out his hand and shook my hand and he said, "Congratulations, you've won the Pulitzer Prize." And it was a hell of a moment. It happens, unbelievably, that it was the 150th birthday of the Cincinnati Enquirer. That day, the 150th anniversary of the Cincinnati Enquirer, and they had never won a Pulitzer for anything. So on their 150th birthday, I won the first Pulitzer Prize for the Cincinnati Enquirer. And it was just remarkable because the next day's edition was to be largely devoted to the history of the paper. And then they were able to put on the front page, that the paper had won a Pulitzer Prize. So it was awesome that way. The Pulitzer for a political cartoonist is probably different than for other journalists. At the time that I won it in the early 90s, I would guess there were maybe 200 or 250 political cartoonists working full-time in America. If you begin to be mentioned as one of the, top people in that field, everybody starts saying to you, "You should win the Pulitzer. When do you think you'll win the Pulitzer? You should have won the Pulitzer by now," whatever. And so it isn't like maybe a photographer or a writer, I'm guessing, who suddenly has the big story land in their lap. It's more like year after year, you're entering your portfolio of your best work and wondering, is this my moment? One of the things that winning the Pulitzer does is it's a great affirmation. I think that winning the Pulitzer freed me up to become a better cartoonist. I felt like I'd been given permission to explore more, to take more chances, to be the best I could be, Because no longer was there going to be an outside voice telling me, yes or no, you made the grade. It felt like now the voice was inside me, and I was the one who would set my own standards and try to eclipse them.